Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Starmada. So Starmada got off to a bit of a rocky start when it was released. It's the newest sectorial to join the Infinity roster. Not long after Wildfire was announced and released, where O12 made its appearance, having only been present in the lore beforehand, Starmada then followed suit as the sectorial for O12. However, when it was first released, it wasn't the most viable option for sectorials. It seemed to lack quite a lot of the options that are needed to make a sectorial really punch, especially given the context of the other sectorials that it was up against. That's all changed in recent months, as Corvus Belli have released a slew of new profiles, updates and changes that are designed to make the sectorial a bit more attractive and usable. And the good news is, it seems to have worked quite nicely. There's three profiles that I'm going to focus on that are part of the new releases, and then what that has done for the fireteam compositions that we have been seeing historically. So the first one that I want to highlight in this video is also one of my favorites. Now, one of the things that surprised me about the road bot in its release and when I assembled it is that it is maybe the first mixed material kit that I have come against. So we've got the S5 and the S3 profiles, which is the transmutated road bot, and then the high mobility form road bot, which is the bike version of it, are in Cyocast plastic. And then the side bot, which is the little assist bot that comes with one or two of the profiles, two of the profiles is metal, which was interesting to have two different materials in a kit for the first time that I have seen. I like the road bot a lot. The model is nice. The transmutated form looks quite nifty, very kind of auto bot, which is very typical of a lot of the bot profiles that have transmutation. But I think there's quite a few things in this profile that I'm really excited by. I did give it its first run look a couple of days ago when I was running Starmada for what felt like the first time in years, having done Morats and MO as my sectorials of choice. But this was pretty exciting. So there's two things about the robot profile that I want to talk about to start with, and that is its cost. It is, I mean, you're looking at 24, 23 points for some really good options there. You've got the paramedic, which I quite like, and then, you know, the points difference there between those is basically the, do you want to be taking the drop bears version or the heavy riot stopper version? I took the heavy riot stopper because it was a point cheaper, but actually the heavy riot stopper on something that's so mobile is insanely good. Next thing that I want to talk about is just how stacked these profiles are with their abilities. Interestingly, the high mobility form does not have the motorcycle equipment on it. So even though it looks like a motorbike, it's not a motorbike, which is quite important when you've got that option to have mimetism on top of motorbikes, whether they can be impetuous or whether they can be regular. Doesn't matter for this profile at all, because they are regular already, they have mimetism already, but just interestingly, like looking at it, it's not a motorbike, so don't think it is. As I said, the profiles are stacked. Let's have a look at this high mobility form. I mean, 8.6 move, very typical for a motorbike, even though this isn't a motorbike. BS is okay, all of that top stat line, not something to really write home about, very normal for what you would expect, especially from the points perspective. Then you look at the special skills. Now, obviously the fact that it's remote presence is quite good because that means it's got two unconscious states. You do have to remember to bring an engineer or something with Gizmo kit, but luckily that's not impossible in Starmada. The dodge +3, really cool. Obviously only starting with a PH 11, but that taking it up to 14 is quite nice. Then you've got the extra movement, which is very cool. I mean, +2 inches on that sort of dodge is handy. Immunity to shock, very standard for something with structure. Mimetism -3, very nice. NWI, it was actually quite a bit, I didn't spot that the first time I took this, but that's quite handy. Obviously, a high chance of it dropping to unconscious because of the fact that it's probably going to be quite advanced. It's going to be one of your push units. So really nice to see that that's got NWI. Terrain total, very handy, especially with some of the mission sets that we've got this season where you get bonuses for terrain total. Transmutation auto, so you decide when it transmutates, and that's going to be situational to what you're trying to achieve. But the thing I love is climbing plus on, again, what is not a motorbike, and I think that's quite key as well. Looking at it, some people are going to think that's a motorbike. They're not going to be expecting climbing plus. It's not a motorbike. It does have climbing plus. And I found this really handy using the paramedic version, which I was actually primarily taking for the mission because I was playing supplies, and the paramedics get a bonus in supplies. And so I just thought, well, having a robot paramedic, bump that up there, do the boxes, or get the boxes, run back very easily. But I actually then had a fire team that got into some trouble on top of a rooftop, having been guided missiled. And it was really nice to have the robot being able to climb up there, do some paramedic, obviously kill the things it was trying to revive, as is very standard when I try and paramedic anything, ride down the side of the building and carry on its merry way. So that climbing plus is really quite useful on something like the Roadbot. In combat form, the Roadbot still has a lot to offer. We gain the CC and BS attributes. BS goes up by 1, CC goes up by 9, quite significant there. So very good if you're going to actually like throw it into combat. 6'4" movement is still pretty nifty, then goes to an S5 profile instead of the S3, so you can see that difference in the models pretty much anyway. The profiles itself, the ones that I generally gravitate to, or found myself gravitating towards, was the submachine gun, Panzerfaust, heavy riot stop and medikit version, but that's also because I wanted to take it in a duo, which I'll talk about as I get to the new fireteam setup towards the tail end of this video. But there's also the drop bears version, which I think could be quite nice. Then there are some singular options. So we've got the marksman rifle, which isn't the specialist, but that would be quite useful. The light shotgun with a +1 burst would be very useful, and that I can actually see going into that fire team option as a very offensive piece if you were that way inclined. Red Fury, always fun to take. Then there are 2 versions with side bots, which there was a bit of a debate between me and my good friend Bryn as to whether the sidebot or the fireteam option was good for the Roadbot. And to be honest, I don't think either is bad. It's going to be situational and depending on how you want to structure and compose the rest of your list. But the sidebot is a great profile, and that comes on the Red Fury, but then there's also a paramedic version with the heavy riot stoppers, SMG, Panzerfaust and sidebot. Both of those are really nice, and it again depends on what you're going to be trying to achieve. The sidebot in itself, nothing really new from what we saw on the Lawkeeper profile, which had a sidebot already. It's a heavy riot stopper, which I love, and it comes with mimetism -3. It's got the 8-6 move to keep up with the high mobility form Roadbot. So the Roadbot I love, and I might even consider taking 2 of them in a Starmada list. But before I dive into the reasons as to why I might be tempted with 2 and one of the reasons why you should be excited about the Roadbot, I want to jump into the next new profile that is helping to give Starmada that resurgence and that boost that is so desperately needed. That is the Sharko. Now, I think it's Sharko. This is my attempt at actually pronouncing something correctly. So I did some research around that S with the circumflex above it, and I think it's a sh, which then makes sense because the logo on the unit is a shark. So I'm going to back Sharko. Naval Reconnaissance Special Unit. Now, this, I love it for a couple of reasons, and more than a couple to be fair. In that it gives Starmada what it lost versus Vanilla. So with Vanilla, there was a lot of forward deployment. We had the Team Sirius, which is a great repeater network. We have Gangbusters, which are infiltrating. They're not camo, but they're also killer hackers. So that's good. I think there's one more profile that gives us infiltrating and camo, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it doesn't matter, because the Sharko gives us that in Starmada, which I felt was one of the biggest gaps in Starmada, was that roadblock infiltrating camo. And we get it, and we get it at good points. We get it with a bunch of profiles that I think are super usable. So we've obviously got the standard things that you would expect from camouflage and infiltrating. We've got surprise attack -3, we've got camo, we've got infiltration, we've got mimetism -3. We don't have hidden deployment, but that's not a loss here. We do have terrain total, which is beneficial for so many missions, and climbing plus. I love the fact that Starmada is starting to lean really into that climbing plus. I actually took my last Starmada list against Bryn with a Zeta and forgot how good climbing plus actually is on so many different profiles. So here we've got the Sharko, that comes with climbing plus. Points spread, we've got between 20 and 25 points, which is amazing. Like, I love a 20-point camo token that you can put at that halfway line, because it just throws a bit of a spanner in the works. It's a bit of a roadblock. Again, some great profiles here. Hacker, killer hacker device, 25 points with boarding shotgun and shock mines. Then got the mine layer profile, which I really love as that roadblock option. That's shock mines as well. That's 23 points. You get the half SWC there. What I love is that none of the other profiles have SWC. So if you're struggling for SWC, if you're getting to the tail end of your points, throw a Sharko in there, it's going to perform well in many different areas. Then we've got 2 forward observer options, SMG flash pulse with wild parrot, and then boarding shotgun flash pulse, shock mines, decharges. I like the wild parrot option quite a bit. I might give that a go. I didn't this time because I took the mine layers just to throw some extra camo tokens down at that halfway mark, especially with supplies where sometimes it can be a bit of a rush to get to the supply boxes, unload them, and then run back to your deployment so that your opponent then has to push up through your defensive lines. And so I did the mine layer options here, but I really enjoyed them. They didn't come out of camo at all. The mines did their trick and took out something and made someone take armor saves and not that second move, so it did succeed in doing its primary focus of slowing something down. But this Sharko profile fills a gap in Starmada that was gaping, you know, no real way to have that halfway. And also having the killer hacker option and the forward observer option, you've got some options there. So one of the options that could be viable depending on how you want to play, but then it's 6-1, half a dozen the other, is with that killer hacker. Obviously you can go hacker hunting, which is going to be good fun, but you could also cyber mask if you really wanted to. Now that takes you to an impersonation marker, which depending on who you're up against might be better than being a camo token, which again is a whole order to re-camo, or you can cyber mask. It's, yeah, so very situational there, but killer hacking does give you some options. Also a specialist that's infiltrating, but then you're getting that with your forward observers too, with the advantage that you can spotlight things, which again, putting a +3, if you've got the guided missile bot, you can then do your guided attacks, but also just +3ing from spotlight can make it easier to take something big down, even if you've just got big guns for show. So the Sharko, I'm so happy this got added, and it may have slipped under the radar slightly because it's, in comparison to the road bot and then potentially what I'm talking about next, not a nothing unit, but not as much to shout home about as that road bot. But the next unit that I want to focus on is the Secu droid. Now, again, quite a few people might be looking at this just going, what's all the fuss about? Others will be going, there's a lot of fuss and it's justified. But this is also going to help me segue nicely into the fireteam compositions that have changed quite nicely for Starmada. So the Secu droid itself, again, low cost, but comes with a whole bunch of equipment. So you're looking at 20 points regardless of which of the 2 profiles you're going to take for the Secu droid. It's got 360 visor, which I love. I generally have a war core, and it's amazing how many times that 360 visor does help when you've got something coming into your back line or something taking a flanking maneuver. Can be quite nice. The remote presence is useful. It is structure 2, which does help us keep things alive a little bit better. You've really got to start thinking about engineers in these Starmada lists. I had the Lambda engineer in mind. It seemed like the best option at the time. Pavati, expensive, but is such a good engineer and such a good doctor that if you're only going to take the one, maybe Pavati could be a good option there. But she's expensive. Lambda is a lot cheaper and can just sit hidden away. Mimetism -3, immunity to shock, as we have noticed with a lot of the remotes. Climbing plus, this is it becoming a bit of a hallmark of Starmada, which I think people need to be aware of, is that there's quite a lot of things with climbing plus in Starmada now. It means that you can deploy first or second and still choose your engagements quite nicely. Yeah, I don't think people love climbing plus enough for what it can offer. But we've got 2 options here: adhesive launch with flash pulse +1 burst and acrylat cannon flash pulse +1 burst. I took the acrylat cannon primarily because I liked the it was disposable, which actually screwed me over a little bit because I went through it because it was in one of my pure link teams. So I went through it a lot quicker than I should have done, but I like it for being able to put something big down, add a bit more range, offer a different ARO piece potentially. But the Secu droid is great, and it's going to help me segue nicely into my fireteam discussion, because the Secu droid is available in quite a few fireteams, and that's really helped build out some of these compositions with a bit more depth and change than we had seen beforehand. So this is one of the areas where I struggled with Starmada particularly, was being able to build a fireteam that was usable and competitive. And so what we've got here are a couple of options. So as we've seen with Starmada, you get the option of 1 core, 1 Harris, and then unlimited duos. I'm going to start with the duos because I think there's a couple of options there that might then help you set up and understand the context for the Harris and the core fire teams. The one that really stands out to me, and the one that I ran, was the Lawkeeper Roadbot duo. I don't think you can go wrong with any of those 3 that are in that. It's the road fire team, and I think an Oko Copperbot with a road bot, I think 2 road bots, a Lawkeeper road bot, Lawkeeper Oko, which is actually its own one, the Lawkeeper fire team. I think all of those are really good options. I took the Lawkeeper and the road bot, but I'd actually be leaning towards 2 road bots potentially in the future. Now, when I go back to when you were talking about when I was talking about the road bots, and the side bot option there is really good. Now, I have used Lawkeepers historically with the side bot, ran them up, used the side bot quite in a suicidal manner to either clear camo token mines or to just throw it at a fire team and then make them dodge. But it's not that good on its own because it's so easy to just dodge out. So you kind of need to do it in such a way where the side bot is coming around the corner, could potentially lay a riot stopper in front of a fire team or something quite big, heavy infantry, but then also have the Lawkeeper move into a position where its Red Fury or its main gun could also be doing dice, so that you're tempting that heavy infantry or that fire team to either dodge, which is a viable option to get out of the way of the riot stopper, but then they're potentially tossing up as to whether 1 or 2 of them are going to get beaten on the dice and then get taken unconscious. So you can use it situationally to create an ARO decision that could come in your favor, but that's pretty tricky. Whereas I think with the road bot and I think with the duo, what you've got the option there is to have the road bot come up, you've got the Lawkeeper go up, maybe, yeah, and I feel like that's maybe better than having the side bot given the situation. And I think this is going to lean towards playstyle more than anything. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer when you're looking at the Lawkeepers, the road bots and the side bots or the fire teams. It's going to come down to you. I went with order efficiency for supplies because then I could get the Lawkeeper, which I took the specialist operative version, and then I took the road bot as the paramedic version, and I was like, well, I can get these guys up as far as possible, and then potentially I can break them and they can go off and do their own things, which again just gave me options. As it turned out, they ended up getting stuck in front of a fire team that had quite a lot of power in front of it, and they just ended up chipping away at that and basically being a roadblock to them with the heavy riot stopper. So again, very situational, but I think that road team fire team is a really good option, whether you're taking the Lawkeeper, the road bot, take 2 road bots. I think that could be quite a good option. 2 Lawkeepers wouldn't be terrible. That would actually be quite horrible. The Lawkeeper Oko, Lawkeeper's fire team also looks pretty good. The Chaksa Long Arms fire team, I don't know that I'll ever take it. Same with the Varangian one. I think that's an interesting option. I like the impetuous that you get with the Varangians, and so I can't see myself taking the Varangian Guards fire team ever, really, because you're effectively, a lot of what I would do with a fire team is that order efficiency. So 1 order gets both of them up, but when you've got an impetuous, you've also got that free order that would get them up. And yeah, you don't have as much control, but you've got smoke with Varangians, which means that you're not always being thrown into a terrible engagement. So unsure about that one. Then you've got the Bronzes fire team, which I just find expensive. Bronzes are not cheap. You've got to take 1. Then you're potentially taking the Knights of Santiago. The thing that's changed here is the Secudroid edition. Now that's 20 points to bolster that bronze. Now I think you're potentially looking at a duo. If you are, you might be looking at the Bronze Knight of Santiago, expensive option. You could do a Harris fairly easily with only a 20 point extra, but then that's really starting to chip away at your points. I might try it. I don't know that I'd love it because we've then got some better options higher up that list. So the Beta Trooper fire team, very easy to create a pure here because of the Beta Trooper keyword sitting on the Epsilon and also the Secudroid, and then obviously the Beta Trooper is core to that Beta Trooper fire team. One of the things I find interesting is that we get Bixi or Bishi, and again, that's swinging on the pronunciation there, and Hector, who I absolutely love. That would make it a mixed fire team, but Bixi could be good fun in that. I might want to try that, but she's also a fairly good standalone unit. I can't really make a decision there, but the Beta Trooper fire team, I want to love it and I want to try it, but it's expensive. Now, Beta Troopers are really good, and throwing in an Epsilon and a Secudroid, you can only take 1 of those, and so Epsilons aren't cheap, Secudroids are, but then you're probably having to take 3 Beta Troopers, and that's not cheap at all. It would be incredibly hardy, but it would also be incredibly expensive, so that would be your main points haul in there. Then when we look up at the Nyoka's fire team, that's cheaper. Harder to make a pure. You do have the bronze with the Nyoka keyword as a wildcard in there, but do you really want to be throwing in 4 Nyokas and then a bronze to keep it pure? Maybe. That would give the bronze quite a beautiful buff for an attacking piece. And I like the Nyokas. You know, at 19 points, you've got, I think it's the missile launcher or rocket launcher version, which for 19 points is not bad at all. I was just going to quickly scroll and find out what it was so I wasn't giving you misinformation. You've got 19 points is the heavy rocket launcher version. Now I do like the Nyokas. They've got the BS attack +1 damage, terrain 0G, climbing plus, of course. But you've also got some options there with potentially taking a forward observer if you want that specialist. You've got the HMG, but that's, you know, it. You'd probably be leaning heavily on the bronze for that, but I don't think that's a bad option at all. I quite like it. Especially buffing that Epsilon. It would be a mixed if you're taking the Epsilon, but that wouldn't be bad. This is the annoying thing about the Epsilon, is that it could be an excellent ARO piece, attack piece, especially with the HMG profile and the MSV2 that it's got, but it's in quite expensive or non-optimal from my perspective. Fire teams, that Beta Trooper 1 could be good if you're willing to sink most of your points into it. Then we get the security fire team with the Kappa Blue Coat, Raven Eye, Secu Droid, again, and Cho. This is quite a nice one, but it would be not weak, but not packing as much of a punch as if you're looking at that Beta Trooper core. So I'm unsure here. I took it as a core. I did have 2 Kappa Paramedics, I had a Blue Coat, I had the Secu Droid, I had the Raven Eye separately, but could have obviously come into here. And then the Kappa Heavy Rocket Launcher. Is it Heavy Rocket Launcher? Missile Launcher, as more of an ARO piece, which got taken out very, very quickly. But that's, you know, a cheap way to get a core with some nice buffs that you might not be using, but I think maybe the Beta Trooper, I don't know what, like you can tell, I keep going back to that Beta Trooper core, but I've not managed to make it work yet, because also having taken the Kappas, having taken the Roadbot and Lawkeeper duo, a couple of those Sharkos, I was then able to squeeze in a Zeta, and then when you've got like a Zeta with the hyper rapid magnetic cannon throwing down and its climbing plus and its tactical awareness, that was just great fun. I actually took the lieutenant version of that and used the lieutenant order in about my turn 1, giving away completely what my lieutenant was. But it's just able to go everywhere with the climbing plus and that movement that I just didn't really care. So I think Starmada is in a much better position now than it ever has been, and I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see more Starmada lists being used as people who bought into O12 with Wildfire like me, then maybe had to transition away from O12 because it just wasn't giving us that grunt, the sectorials that other factions have. Now we could start to see people going back to O12, back to Starmada, because there are so many good options here. Vanilla was always quite good, but wasn't quite as competitive necessarily as we had been seeing. So O12 Vanilla, still probably in the same sort of situation, even though we've now got robots in there. I don't think the Sharko actually makes it into Vanilla, but the robots will. I think that's been confirmed by Coney on the forums, even though it wasn't initially going to be in there. But Starmada is definitely where it's at and is one to watch out for. I'm going to be playing a lot more Starmada now. It might actually be the one this season for me, because I've got all the models. It's the easiest one for me to do. But I'm interested to hear what you think about Starmada. Is this finally where it needs to be, or do you think there's a lot of hype about nothing? Is Bixie's inclusion in that maybe a bit too much? Is it admission by Corvus Belli maybe that Starmada wasn't quite where it needed to be? The fact that they've had to bring out 3 new profiles, added it to it in order to put it back into the fore. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on Starmada, where it sits right now, and what we can expect to see from it in the future. And I will be back soon with more videos.